I'd like to call to order the February 10th, 2026 Forest Grove School District Board of Directors meeting at 5:30 p.m. We'll begin with a roll call of members present. Kate Grandusky. Present. Pete Truax.
Here.
Maya Andrade is excused tonight. Marisa Franco is arriving shortly, and Alma Lozano is excused, and I'm here. Copy. If we can all please rise for the flag salute. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I move to approve the agenda as presented.
And I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are gonna go right ahead to the board reports tonight. We'll start with Director Truax.
Okay, a couple of things. One, excuse me. I am the board representative to the City of Forest Grove's Parks and Rec Committee. We've had one meeting at the ungodly hour of 7 o'clock in the morning. And there was the first meeting of the new session, so it's more of a get acquainted meeting. My effort to have the meetings moved off of 7 o'clock in the morning met with a resounding thud. And so we meet again tomorrow morning at 7. Items on the agenda, one of the items on the agenda concerned me is the new East Side Park, which was purchased about almost 2 years ago for roughly $500,000, and we are the city is in the process of putting together the plan and beginning the preparation of that park for the use of people on the east side of Forest Grove. That would be basically from city limits with Cornelius west to the intersection of Highway 47 and Highway 8. So those people who have been underserved as far as regional parks in the city are concerned will have a spot, and that is sorely needed and highly anticipated by that group. It will be involved in part, we hope to have, since that's about a block and a half from Neil Armstrong and from Fern Hill, and about 3 blocks from Echo Shaw in Cornelius, and another 3 to 4 blocks of Joe Gale. That also might be a part that might help serve the school district also. You'll have those kinds of discussions. The other item I wanted to share with you was from the poem Pippa Passes by Robert Browning. The final line, one of the verses is God's in his heaven and all is right with the world. So I just thought I would share that. I'm finished.
Thank you, Director Truax. And for the record, Marisa Franco is now in attendance at 5:33 p.m. Hi, Marisa.
Hi, hello.
Welcome.
I'm so sorry.
We're sorry for school coming directly. So appreciate that. And putting you on the spot, Marisa, if you did want to give any director report about, I know you did attend the town hall with Stanford meeting, I'm sure they didn't have to speak about that, but.
Yeah, I thought that was a great experience. That was my first time, I think, being in that type of conversation and going into a town hall meeting in my role. I think there was great conversation had. A lot of the things that we're seeing a lot right now with budget cuts and how ICE immigration is impacting our communities, and just, it was great to see other elected officials we're all kind of on the same page and bringing up those worries to Bonamici. So that was overall, it was great and empowering to see our community there as well.
Thank you for representing that. For my report tonight, there's a couple things legislatively, one of urgency, but I did want to share with the board that the board chairs in the region had our second meeting, and This is something new for our boards to be able to do, to find a way to connect. We agreed at this meeting to meet on a regular basis every month. We're meeting at noon time on Zoom. We did have every single board chair there from our region. And the conversation at this particular one, as we're getting to know each other, is how we can work together to be more effective, especially around advocacy. And that's the same conversation we started last week at this board. One of the other topics of that meeting was House Bill 4011, which you have some potential testimony in front of you tonight. Boards did talk at length about the impact that the class size bill will have fiscally and what that means. And one of the things we talked about, this is the same conversation we had as boards last year when this bill came up. But one of the things we surfaced is we're showing that same fiscal impact. It's clear that we mathematically cannot afford the pieces that are in that bill, and yet we're not able to sort of break through with that information. And one of the things we talked about is we asked how many boards in our region actually talked about that bill publicly and shared that fiscal impact. And most boards had not. They had individually tried to talk with reps. We had not really coordinated fiscal impact. So there was interest and consensus in having boards work together to maybe compile fiscal impacts of bills like that one. And there were several boards on that call that were interested in holding a work session publicly to be able to share with the community what that means and why we are advocating to spend our money in other areas that impact student outcomes. And so it was a really good conversation. We now, in between those meetings, are starting to share testimony and questions and facts with each other, so our boards are aware of what other boards are talking about. And one of the other things we're thinking about is we ask boards, are there a regular item on the agendas where boards talk about their advocacy work and how they're doing that work. And some boards did have that as a regular agenda item. Other boards did not. And we talked about the importance of maybe making sure that's built in. That's some of the work our board has started to do so that we have a space to share maybe a common message even and eventually work together as chairs. So that was some really exciting progress there. In front of you tonight, I brought to the board, we had noticed yesterday that House Bill 4011, which is the class size bill, is going to come to a hearing tomorrow. We're in legislative session, so we get very short notice that these things are coming for a hearing. I already signed up to provide testimony. It's the testimony I'm bringing to the board tonight is very similar to testimony that we sent last year, which just really talks about, again, fiscal impacts. But thank you to Dr. West for providing some answers to some questions that we had about what that potentially looks like. And I have a copy for the board. What I'm looking for tonight is consensus in submitting this as a school board. And again, our work tonight at 7 o'clock is kind of backwards, but this is exactly why our board has wanted to talk together. We haven't really figured out. One of the things that Director Franco brought up to me is just identifying our operating procedures as a board. And this is one of them. What does it look like when we're submitting testimony? When is it okay for us to submit that as a board? What are our expectations for that? How do we communicate that? So I think we'll be talking more about that tonight at 7. But in the meantime, I'd like to hear from board members if your comfort level as submitting this as a board, as opposed to me submitting individually as a board member.
I, for one, would be much more comfortable if you submitted it as representation, opinion, and testimony on behalf of the school board or school district. I think this is an item that we need to step up to. I don't think it's, we all want smaller class sizes, but this doesn't solve the problem. To me, it's a giant step side. I'll have other comments later on tonight, but the note, the missive that we received earlier this year from Dr. Williams of the Oregon Department of Education outlining some of those reductions that they have talked about, nothing short of abysmal. And I haven't had a chance to wail on that for it, so I think I will save that till, our discussion this evening, but this document is very hurtful to education, in the state of Oregon, as is the current financial situation, make no mistake. We're in a bind, and, we have to figure out a way to get out of it, but I don't think the answers are found in either the legislation you're talking about or the, proposal, from Dr. Williams. I'll shut up.
I'm totally for it. I think it's an efficient way to have board voice, when, all the board members, they're in support of what we've written. And you work with the, speak off staff and Suzanne. And I think, when you look and see how many people are testifying, we're all on the same page. We don't make it a 5 separate letters. I think that's a very helpful way of doing it. I appreciate it.
I think I agree with our, the consensus here with the board. I think it's a well-written letter. Although I'm not a teacher and I have only been in the student portion of it, logistically speaking, financially speaking, I think it makes sense why we're in opposition where this just isn't doable. I think it would be great if us as a board, we've already agreed to have it represent us.
Don't ever say only a student ever share. That's why we're here.
Most important part. So, okay, thank you for that. And again, we'll talk tonight about how we land on things like this and how we go forward as a board. I did, because we're on a short timeline, I did reach out to Senator Solomon, and I also reached out directly to Rep. McLean. They're both literally in committee meetings this morning. The Senate Education Committee was quite a discussion. I did share the link to that because Senator Solomon had some really important points about looking at state funding and rethinking how we fund for the state. So you're right, Dr. Truax, this is a small part to a much bigger issue that some would argue we need to tackle first. Compliments to both Senator Solomon and Rep. McLean, because Rep. McLean actually texted from committee and had her legislative aide Grace call. And Grace and I were able to talk through some of the elements of this letter. And one thing I shared with Rep. McLean in particular is that though she might not always vote the same way that we would on a particular bill, as our representative, I really encouraged her to at least elevate the numbers and the fiscal impact of our district. And I think that's a way that both things can happen. We don't always expect our reps to vote the way we want, but we do expect them to represent what we're putting out. And the last piece, and again, we'll talk about it at 7, is I think it's important to share this testimony with our community so that they know how the board is doing this work and what's being submitted on their behalf. And again, part of the bigger discussion about how we do that, how we want to do that, and what that looks like. So thank you to everybody for that. And I think that.
You need a motion for consensus, or can we just?
I think we can just consensus it.
So when you make the statement, it would be okay for you to say you're speaking on behalf of the school.
Well, I did, and this was another thing that came down from OSBA is that people were told on Friday, if a board is submitting general testimony as a board, they suggested strongly that it needs to come to a board as a resolution. So I was able to connect with Spencer at OSBA and say, that's not accurate, is it? And he said, no. The board publicly needs to identify a way that the board wants to be able to do testimony. And as long as that's been talked about and agreed upon, that's fine. And I think what we're doing here is explaining to people how we land on that. It's really difficult in a short session because we literally have a couple hours to pound something out and then we might not meet for another week. So we'll, again, talking about those logistics tonight at 7 will be really helpful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. West unless. Okay, great. I'm going to start with our enrollment data that gets us up to speed with where we're at as a district. When we met last month and I shared these data, we were roughly about 80 students below our projections. We have picked up a few students. That's typical after the holidays. We have many students that travel to Mexico and other countries in South and Central America. And some of those students return, some of them don't. So we have picked up a few students. As you see in these data here, primarily it's at the high school level, where we have the influx of students at the elementary level and then to a slight degree at the middle level. We are below our projections. That said, our class size averages do remain low overall. So if you look here, our instructional class sizes, K-6 are at 24, 7, 8, 24, 9, 12, 24. So we are doing a good job of maintaining low class sizes. We are being helped by low enrollment. And as we have been discussing, because of our declining enrollment, because our enrollment is below our budget projections for this year, we actually have more staff than our methodology would suggest that we should have. As we go through our reduction process for this year, and we will have to do that, we will be looking to maintain these class size ratios as low as possible, but we also need to offset our costs, and that will probably involve impacts to staff. And so we may see a bump in at least one or two of these levels in terms of instructional class size. Any questions from the board before I move on to my regular report? Okay. Moving on to just a couple of highlights that I want to bring up. I too attended our Congresswoman's town hall, Congresswoman Bonamici, and I agree with Director Franco. She did a nice job of fielding questions and being present for the individuals who were there. I also attended the town hall with Attorney General Rayfield, Senator Salmons, Representative Sosa, and Representative McLean. Many more people attended that town hall, and the environment in that town hall was significantly more emotional than what we experienced with Congresswoman Bonamici. And I'm bringing that up because I want us as a school district to remember that we have families and students that continue to be impacted by federal action in our area. Although we are seeing a lull right now, it is not a zero impact at this time. I'm continuing to hear from families and staff that are directly impacted by enforcement efforts. So just want to raise that and elevate that as it continues, something that as a district we are responding to. In addition to that, just briefly, I'm going to highlight a couple of things from Neil Armstrong Middle School today, because I was there this morning. I spent quite a bit of time there this morning, and it was a ton of fun. So one of the things that our interim principal, Terry McGillicott, has instituted for this year is she is recognizing any student who shows any growth in English language development, literacy development in Spanish or English, and math development. So today was award day for language arts, and I was able to go around with the administrators as they presented awards, and every student received an award of soccer as well. And I was reminded, and I'm bringing this up because I was reminded that our middle school students they have 1 foot in childhood and 1 foot in adulthood. And even the kids that didn't want to were pretty proud that they received that award and that recognition. And I think that's a wonderful way to elevate the progress and the hard work of students, and it brings some joy into our middle level, which I think is really important to highlight, because there can be a perception that the middle level is just hard, and sometimes it is, but those kids are also delightful. So that was great fun. While I was there, I was also able to step into a classroom and observe a health lesson, and today's health lesson was around tobacco use and specifically around vaping. And it was such a good lesson. It was clear, direct, truthful, honest conversations with the kids, and the kids were asking smart questions. And I do believe the way that these lessons are being taught at the middle level and the way that these health teachers are engaging, this is a preventative curriculum And at least some of these students will choose to not use tobacco or vape products because of what they're learning today. So I want to thank our middle school colleagues who have been engaged in these activities. They're really having a positive impact on our students. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Kara. Okay. I do see FGEA in the house. Is there a report tonight from? Okay, all right, just making sure. We'll move on to unscheduled public appearance. The board appreciates community members sharing information during public comments. Public comments can be made in person or through Zoom by submitting the designated form on the webpage. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes, as is the protocol for board meetings. Board members will not comment or respond to questions. Public criticism or complaints about school district personnel are not allowed. And I do believe we have one public comment.
So Dale, even can I come to the microphone?
Welcome, Dale.
Thank you.
You could just state your name and affiliation, maybe? Address?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Chair Kotke, board members, and Superintendent Dr. West. Dale Feek started teaching in 1966 in Forest Grove and retired in 2000. Affiliation, parent, grandparent, community member, activist, active at age 81, still love life. I mean, is that good enough? Live at 3363 Lavina Drive, and lived there for a long time. Neighbor of former Mayor Pete Truax. And so my purpose here is just to let you know why I'm here. So I'm going to do that. So at the Forest Grove Individual Vigil in front of the library, I talked with former Mayor Truax, colleague and at Neil Armstrong Junior High and friend, and said hi to many people I know, including City Councilor Angelina Falconer and Board Chair Christy Kotke. And your dad was there and he left early. He's a personal friend of mine. I had a longer conversation with Kate Grandusky, who was a special ed teacher in Forest Grove when I was. And she really said, I need to get an appointment with Dr. Suzanne West. And so I said, because you said I need to do that, when I talked with Bethany, I said, former board chair and current chair need an appointment directly with her. So I have an appointment with her on February the 13th. My teaching career started as a 5th grade teacher at Joseph Gale in 1966. Then 1 year later, 8th grade science teacher because they wanted me to coach 7th grade baseball because I played 8 years of baseball, high school, and in high school, they only had a 3-year high school, but they brought me up, and so I played 4 years varsity, hit number 4, and then played 4 years of college baseball. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. That didn't work out. I became a teacher, which was better for me, I'll tell you. I earned a couple of master's degrees at the University of Oregon, specialized, and came back. District didn't have to hire me back, but they hired me back because they liked what I did before. And so they had a Title I grant, Neil Armstrong Junior High. So it was a reading clinic, which meant a teacher in 1 aide, director, teacher in 1 aide. But we served the lowest performing 56 kids because I had a neat way to identify those kids, the lowest performing readers at Neil Armstrong, and served them for about 12 years, I guess. Ended up doing a dissertation related to that in Title I, evaluation of that. And I did a dissertation related to this stuff I did at Neil Armstrong. So I retired in 2000 after serving in Forest Grove schools in a wide range of areas, many different schools in Forest Grove. Where's the timer?
Just about time. You're our only public comment. Do you think you can wrap within the next minute?
Oh, yeah. I have to say something. My time is being used, all right? This is what former Mayor Pete Truax used to say. And it's from his speech teacher, Pacific. I love a finished speaker. I really, really do. I don't mean one who's polished. I mean one that's through. I have about 45 seconds, I guess. So I really appreciate you, Dr. West, and how you introduced Congresswoman Bonamici at that. I appreciate how you moderated at Pacific University. And so I got to know you somewhat in that role. I also read about you and what you've done, so I can understand why you, Kate Krendesky, has high regards for Dr. West. I don't see the timer.
What is up there? Up there.
You're good.
I'm good? All right. But please let me know when 10 seconds I'm done, okay?
Being real.
Well, in conclusion, we'll get to know you more later. So I appreciate your service. And I don't know if I'll come and talk too much more, but I want to give you the book on tyranny, 20 lessons from the 20th century. And anybody else wants a book, I have an extra one. I've given 185 of them away so far. It's very important. People be aware of what Timothy Snyder says about tyranny.
Thank you so much. Actually, have a couple comments about that's it all. Same at the house.
Thank you.
All right, we are gonna move to consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine, non-controversial items to be voted on under one motion. Are there any items within the consent agenda a board member or the superintendent wishes to discuss separately? Seeing none,
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, and we're gonna move on a little bit early to action items. Oregon School Employees Association, employment agreement with Sarah Hamlin, Director of Human Resources. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Sarah Hamlin. So we are here tonight to put in front of you the classified employees agreement, which has been tentatively agreed upon through the process that we went through of negotiations. One more, there we go. Through the spring and through the fall. So negotiations began on April 21st in the spring, and we met regularly until the summer, and then both parties agreed that we would break for the summer. And then we picked back up in September and began meeting regularly. Some of our meetings were a little bit shorter, some of our meetings were longer. A lot of the meetings went from early in the morning until about 1 p.m. So we had a good amount of time to work together and collaborate throughout this process. And on January 21st, we wrapped up our last TAs, and so we came to a tentative agreement across the whole contract, which we were very excited about. The association began their communication with their group at that point. I'm sure they had been communicating all along the process, but the communication about the fact that we have TA'd the entire contract. And they voted last week and overwhelmingly voted to ratify the contract. So we are here tonight to get approval by the board.
Questions?
So I do have a little bit more information about the process. So through this process, with the classified agreement, we did notice every article was noticed. And so that gave us an opportunity to really go through and make sure that the contract language was what we needed on a really broad scale. It gave us an opportunity to review all the different articles and the language within. Throughout the process, we wanted to ensure that the language was clear for our staff members and as streamlined as possible. And we approached the negotiations with the lens of operationalizing in areas where we needed to in order to ensure that we could live up to the language that we were negotiating and that we were agreeing upon. So through this process, thorough discussions and really clear real world examples allowed the teams to be able to come together and help each other understand the perspective that we were trying to put forward. And it moved the conversation along to a place where we got to agreement. So really digging in and trying to understand each other's perspectives was really important throughout this process for us to gain a clear understanding. So the updates to the contract, some important ones or some ones to be mindful of. We did have some salary increases this year over the next few years. So the salary increases are outlined on this slide, and then the new insurance caps are also listed there. One thing to point out is that the OSBA has been contributing to their own insurance pool. And that insurance pool, beginning with the 26-27 benefit plan year, they will then be putting contributions toward their staff members' premiums, in addition to the district's contribution. That is a similar format that the FGDA uses at this time. So a couple of other items that we worked toward, the OSCA they had a lot of discussion about where their financial priorities are. And coming out of those discussions, we agreed upon a grade change for the special education instructional assistants. They will move to grade 6, effective with the 26-27 school year. In addition to that, special education instructional assistants that are skills trainers at the Oak Grove Academy will begin receiving a 50-cent differential per hour. And there is now going to be an option for employees who work less than 12 months to be able to have their pay spread over the time that they work. So right now, all staff's pay is spread over 12 months, all classified staff pay is. And this allows a staff member to be paid based on their work year versus having their pay spread over the summer. Okay. A couple of other items that we feel were really important for our classified staff members are tuition reimbursements. Tuition reimbursement is an important investment in our staff members' continuing education and professional and personal growth. The tuition reimbursement doubled this year from last year. We also increased the translating and interpreting differential to 50 cents per hour. And then we switched an emergency leave day to personal leave. The emergency leave day, there wasn't a lot of clarity, or it felt restrictive in how staff could use that day. So switching it to personal allows a little bit additional flexibility there. And then there was a sick leave pool created. This allows classified staff members to be able to contribute to a pool, and then other classified staff members to request days from the pool if they are experiencing a significant health situation. Okay. So thank you. We spent a lot of hours together, a lot of time and effort collaborating and thinking creatively together and understanding where each other was coming from. And so we just want to extend our thanks to everybody who participated in the committee, the negotiations committee. We have a couple of members here tonight that participated, and we really appreciate everyone's time. And we want to extend a special thanks to Pete for being a part of that committee as well. We appreciate your perspective and support throughout the process. Would you like to add anything?
Well, I would like to see if Kent would like to add something just on that, as president of the association, if he could. I'm putting him on the spot, I realize that, and.
Thank you, Pete.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All glad to do that. If you could, share with us a little bit of, if I'll go first. It wasn't the smoothest of sailing at some points. We did have some rocky, issues to deal with. And we got through those. We were mature about it. We didn't throw chairs at each other. We didn't call each other names, at least not that I heard. And, worked well through those tense situations to actually move beyond that and move towards agreement. Maybe I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses, but I think that was the issue. Kent, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I will not.
And if I may, we did reach out to Kent, and I'm gonna try to save you here, Kent. Kent said that he didn't want to actually speak tonight, but I will jump in. Kent, you're welcome to come up to the mic if you would like to add something, but I'll jump in and echo a little bit of what we heard from Sarah. The process was longer than I think it has been in this district for a while, and it was good. As Sarah said, we went through every single article. We were able to talk about a lot of language. But even more than that, we listened to each other. So to Director Truax's point. We didn't always agree, and that was okay, because we were able to listen and we were able to find points of compromise. And that is what these conversations are for. So overall, I think it was a productive and constructive process that landed us in a good spot with our association colleagues. Thank you for that. Any other comments from the board? Questions for Sarah? Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. Yeah, congratulations to everyone. It does mirror what we do. Well, number one, it is so much time that you don't see behind the scenes until you're there, you go through it. So appreciation for the additional time that people spend and the energy they spend. I will say a couple times I would check in to say, well, how's it going? How's it going with negotiations? And the answer was always, we're having some really important, good discussions. And it was, I mean, that was truly pretty consistent throughout. So it's really nice to hear that we can get to the other sides of those. And I'm happy to see some of those agreements and they mirror what we did with the Teachers Association as well. So.
And I will add that I came into the process halfway through. So it was difficult for everybody on both teams. They had one board member who left, and then the new kid in town came into the game. So that was a bump in the road, but both sides negotiated that well and put up with me. I move to approve the proposed 3-year OSCEA and FGSD classified employees agreement be effective for school years 2025 through 2028.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
We do a roll call vote on this. This is an important agreement, and I think everybody has to be on the record. I would much rather have a roll call vote of that. If we can do that.
Noted. All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Brisa Franco. Yes, I'm not sure. Kate Grandusky.
Yes.
Pete Truex.
Yes.
And Christy Cocky, I am a definite yes, and that motion passes, and thank you to everybody, and thanks Pete for the suggestion, and thanks to everybody who's here tonight and for the work that you did. Okay, we are going to adjourn, I believe. No, discussion. We're going to the, recess. Recess, yeah, recess. Do I know? Wow. Okay. All right, the board will now recess at 6:09 p.m. and reconvene an executive session at 6:35 p.m. for the purpose of hearing a grievance appeal in accordance with ORS 192.660, parentheses 2, that's just F. As a reminder, these sessions are closed sessions. The media may attend, but may not report on discussion or information disseminated during the executive session. Thank you, Beth. Does it have to be? Okay. Board has concluded executive session. Will now reconvene in regular session at 7:04 PM. We are going to talk for 26 minutes about our board advocacy plan ideas. And for the board, I've shared sort of a framework based on your initial feedback, which was on an initial framework that we put out, kind of compiled people's thoughts and then put together this agenda for what we can accomplish. We're not going to accomplish all of this in 25 minutes, but I think it's a good start to have a discussion about how we're going to do this work together. And then we'll move forward from this discussion and maybe continue in leadership and then just see where we go from there. So,
Question.
Yes.
So I can, oh, that,
yeah,
okay.
okay. Okay, so the first section, I almost felt like after this morning, we need to have a bigger discussion about what is our role in advocacy, and only because I had conversations with each director separately, specifically about this testimony. And then our two commitments are advocacy and engagement, but then we also had conversation about upcoming budget meetings and communication to the community. And it does seem like our two commitments are kind of merging into one. Maybe advocacy and engagement is going to be where we land, because advocacy maybe does need to also be engaged with our community here. But if we can start with the first one about how we coordinate advocacy access, and when we agree we should be able to coordinate as a board on advocacy and not individually, what does that look like? And if exceptions exist, what are they? And what is the minimum shared understanding on, especially legislative issues that our board feels like they need to have together so that we can speak on behalf of our board? And there's a couple different questions wrapped up in that, but I'm thinking about even our recent attendance at town halls and our communication with people there. When you're out individually talking with people, if I'm talking with people in Salem or Peters, how do we want to coordinate what our talking points are and should be, and when can we go off script and be okay with that as well? And I think we could use this as an example if we want. It's testimony about this particular bill.
Well, first of all, this is Director Truax. Madam Chair, it seems to me that your example, excuse me. Sorry. Your example that you cited for us tonight, that you brought to us for your testimony is hits the ball out of park in that we were able to see that, you agreed to it, to come to consensus that you can go to Salem tomorrow or the next day or whatever, and make a statement saying this is the viewpoint of the Forest Grove School Board. The collective viewpoint, even though you may have authored, we're sharing the authorship, sharing the credit with the rest of the board. If you hadn't gotten that, you would have still gone down and you still would have testified. But then you would have had to say, these are views, my own views, and not necessarily those of the Forest Grove Board of Directors. I think it lends a little bit of weight when we do have that discussion, which we had tonight, and are able to say, yeah, you carry our water for us down there. I think that's the crucial step that we have to do, is that when we have a statement that we want to make, instead of going off on a wild hair, such as I'm wont to do at times. We come to the board and we say, this is the issue. This is my comments on it. What say you on those comments? And we can say yes or no, or go ahead, whatever. But I think the timing is important, is that we don't put the board in the position, you have courtesy not to put the board in the position where they can't say yay or nay. They don't have enough time. Sometimes that's the fault of somebody else, but we can't create that issue on our own. You have to give us an opportunity, or Teresa has to give us an opportunity. Kate has to give us the opportunity to see the testimony, to see the opinion, and sign off on it. So I think there's the shared messaging part is one where we make every effort, should make every effort to get that shared message out to everybody and either get agreement or opposition or modification of the ability to modify it. Failing that, frankly, whoever makes the testimony on their own.
Well, it feels really reactive. I mean, these are special cases with short session. It feels reactive. What Spencer talked to me about at OSBA is they're having board members call them saying, we have board members on our board going out and giving testimony and our board has not agreed. They're getting calls from different boards, and it comes back to how does a board agree ahead of time? And I almost would like to back this way up to think about how do you build an advocacy plan, and it maybe is intertwined with the work around the budget communication, where we're trying to elevate with the community how we spend monies in this district, why we spend the monies the way they do, and how that's tied to what our students need. And then building our plan around that. I mean, we are reacting to a couple of bills here, but I wouldn't know when I met with someone today and she said, well, what is the school board's, what's your platform? And I said, well, we're gonna talk about tonight at 7. Like I don't know. I mean, we're reacting to these short bills here, but as a board, what does that look like in the community? Is it building an understanding of how this district operates? And from that, then when a bill comes up, we can say, oh, 4011, that actually ties into the work we're doing, and that's gonna take away from this work. You know what I'm saying? Like backing up way up. What's our purpose for this advocacy? And that's what we're saying at that legislative dinner. Like board's been doing this for a couple of years and it's not working, right? So we could get aligned, but aligned around what?
Well, I think that, it's gonna depend on the issue. So for example, there's a huge budget shortfall. And it's not only with us, but it's throughout the whole state. And I think with our superintendent and your advocacy, and communicating with, our Senator Solomon and Colleen is that, because we're acting now, that they're coming and asking questions and asking how to go about this. I think the 3 things that the board is responsible for is this: hiring the superintendent, evaluating the superintendent, and approving the budget. And so the budget is a big, big piece. And I think tying it in with Eileen makes sense. I think tying in, what the issues are in our shortfall, and then how the legislative bills are going to impact us. And I think that the chair should be the one that submits the letter. But what you've been doing all along is, contacting all the supers, other members of the board and ask them, what are your thoughts about it? Like the one that you just gave us. But, since I've been on the board, well, I would say since Fred and Mark and Val got on the board, we have been a consensus board. And so periodically we have sent things to our representatives and sent statements down to Salem. And, you know, with one person speaking, but the other board members have signatures under it, but I don't have any real wisdom other than I think that doing what you've been doing, communicating with the other boards, then coordinating with Suzanne about, you know, how do we word this so they get the message? I think also the coordination of, Suzanne with the other superintendents. But I think a really good thing that you're doing right now, is coordinating with the other, board chairs, because oftentimes you need a leader. You need someone that's gonna, you know, sort of say, let's do this. And you always are gonna have followers, but you don't have a lot of people that have the initiative like you do, Christine, you know, around people to talk about the issues, because the issues in Washington County are almost all of it's special ed, it's funding, etc. So I think we're on our way. That's what I think right now. I think we're on. You look positive.
Well, I still feel like if we come back to the visits when Senator Solomon and Rep. McLean came and Suzanne and Travis talked about what we are doing, that work, that to me is advocacy in a proactive way. And since that, like, for instance, I don't think I've done any further thought about pushing that forward as a message. And those should also be letters, you know, and then once this session is over, when we do meet with those reps, what would we like to make sure we build maybe off that meeting? What are the things we want to build upon? What is our overall theme? And I still feel like this is reactive. Like, I can write this up and we can agree, but I don't call you guys first to say, hey, I'm writing this testimony. I mean, I kind of do, but not really. I'm just like this already, right? So I'd rather have it be a situation where this is part of a plan that we have. So when some of these topics come up, yes, our board is laser focused on this. Maybe this doesn't have any impact and wasn't worth the time for the time that I had to ask Dr. West and Eileen to pull some numbers.
Well, one of the things I think of is the revolving door down in Salem of legislators. Many of them don't come from an educational background, and their agenda may be technology, it may be agriculture, it may be forestry, etc. And that even when we're not in session is how can we educate them about the needs of our school districts, because they continually do the same things over and over again that are not really meeting the needs of our kids and our teachers. So when they're not in session, do we meet and identify a couple of things where we become proactive for the next session and say, okay, what are we gonna, what are we looking down the road? And it could be, you know, I think for the next 3 years, it's gonna be, deficit spending. I mean, I think we're really going to be looking at deficit spending. And so what did we identify as a group? I mean, Washington County is pretty much a powerhouse because of the population. But we should be educating those people on, and I don't know exactly how to do it if we try to meet, you know, a handful of them, you know, from this region and that region and that. But I think that that's something meeting with the board chairs in Washington County. And also talking to our legislators, how do we communicate to help the other legislators understand what they're I don't want to say to their face that they're ineffectual in their legislation, but it's not meeting the needs of our students. And so I think we need to, you know, deal with the short session right now, but then I think we need to plan on how we need to educate the legislators in a productive way. I think that's too big of a job.
Well, I think this was something we talked about, I think Adam brought up, which was having more communication, what that communication looks like with our representatives. And how we can strengthen that. And kind of how we get the conversation going, and back to your point about, I mean, yeah, about Christie's point about being proactive rather than reactive. And I think that ties into just stronger communication with our representatives and more communication more often, so that we're not, like, you're not having to just quickly react and then us have a consensus about, like, this is us as a board and this is what we want to do as a board. And I think it just goes back to just how can we regularly have meetings with our representatives, not during any short or long session when they're busy or having to juggle with each other things. And when they maybe have more time to talk to us and foresee issues that are gonna impact us, and how we can work towards a solution or some sort of understanding that this is what our district needs, rather than reacting to something that's already been put through and then having to fight for what our district needs are in a moment where decisions are being made so quickly.
That was one of the conversations I had with Grace today about Susan McLean. Was she had mentioned at the legislature setting up something. And Grace said, well, it would be nice if there was a way that we could all talk together. And I said, well, actually, we're gonna try this Zoom thing once a month, and maybe that's a format where it is a public meeting, but we do use one of those to invite our reps to that hour-long Zoom. But then by the time we get there, we do have some proactive talking points. I don't know what those should be. And then when I was talking to this community member today, she's like, I'm watching these meetings and I'm looking at the website, I'm not really clear on what it is this board is advocating for doing as a whole. How would you know? Because we don't really post our. It's the same issue when I watched Janine this morning. Janine gave this amazing speech that would be important for people to hear, but how does that all, what is the information we need? So right now, I'm just sending that to you guys. Oh, this is a good one. I'm sending something to Sam to say, hey, I just heard this. It just feels so disjointed. And do you have thoughts there? Because then there's OSBA and COSA are kind of trying to streamline, but again, that's reactive planning. And I feel like if you became a school board member in Forest Road, what do you need to get comfortable with when you're talking to our community about what our schools are doing for kids and what we, like you said, maybe those are the two anchors that we work on, so we have kind of this elevator packaged talking points.
Well, I guess my issue is that we are in a situation now with the special session and with the irrational behavior of our administration, that federal administration, not local, that we have, by nature, we have to be reactive because the legislative session is so short and everything's coming at us from a fire hose. And on the national scene, everything is so irrational and so hurtful and so hateful that we have to react to that. We don't have a choice. Nobody ever ran a school board saying, oh boy, I can hardly wait to deal with the immigration problem. And yet, every school board member across this great land of ours has to deal with that. So I agree in a perfect world, we would be able to develop an advocacy plan saying we want classrooms that do this, we want activities that support this, we want funding that allows for this expansion. But the real world has a cruel way of intruding upon that almost Eden-like thinking that we have time to do stuff and we don't. So I don't have a complaint that we don't have advocacy plan written down that we ought to be able to say in case of fire, break glass. I am, I would be concerned if we didn't have members of the school board that weren't and administrative members that weren't able to say, okay, in the event of this fire, this is the glass we're going to break and these are the things we're going to do. I think it's almost by management by walking around. If you get my drift.
Yeah. I think to Pete's point, we're constantly gonna have to be playing catch up. I mean, for the foreseeable future, that's what our reality is. And it's not just us as a school board, but I've seen it across nonprofits too. It's a lot of needing to be reactive and also trying to figure out how to make procedures so we can be proactive in case it happens again in the future. But it's really hard to do when you're trying to react to the world that's happening around you and create solutions or come to a consensus and also try to establish some sort of procedure so that it doesn't happen again. And I think it's just gonna take time. But I think having these discussions and figuring out what that looks like and then setting it up and also trying to be reactive at the same time is kind of the world that we're gonna live in for a while, but I think it's important that we set up some sort of advocacy plan and how it's gonna look like. That can be amendable in the future, but as of right now, I think it's going to be a very slow progression forward. But those are kind of my thoughts on it, and I agree with what Pete said. Kind of a dumpster fire right now, I'm having to react to it.
Well, and the missing piece for me is, again, I feel like, and this is a conversation we can talk about in leadership too, is I'm not sure if what I'm doing is having an impact, and maybe the flow needs to come from the superintendent to say, here's what we're hearing at COSA. And here's how this board could advocate on our behalf. And here's where I don't think it's worth your time. And coordinate that a little bit more, so it's not me saying, oh, look at this thing, and then me sending it. I just feel completely disorganized with it. Maybe that is partially because it feels so reactive, but it doesn't feel intentional. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I'm not in this seat, or we have different board members in this seat, what will be their path for doing this work? And to have to recreate it every time, I mean, there's an element depending on the person and the capacity, but generally, what is the expectation? So we could agree in short session that the chair will work with the superintendent to identify key bills that this board, we know are coming, so we can be ready. But I think there needs to be an education piece with that, because again, I'm sending this to you, but I'm not really hearing from you first before I write it. What are your thoughts? You know, which would be important. So,
Well, I dispute that. And you've given us, this is the right way to go about it as far as I'm concerned. You give us the rough draft of history. And then we can take this and shape it, we can, do all the things we do. But if you were to say, okay, this bill is coming before legislature, 4011, is it? What do? All of a sudden, you have 5 people sitting around here saying, okay, let's do this. And it ends up at the end of the evening or the end of the session, then we've done nothing. But you've given us a starting point here. You've given us something that we can say, yeah, this is a great idea. Or this is a great idea. Here are a couple of things that could make it even better. Or Christie, this is a crock. And start over. But at least we have something. And I think, so you're doing the right thing. Don't sell yourself short on this, because I find that that's how stuff gets done, is somebody comes up with an idea. And then other people take that idea and run with it. But if there's no idea to run with, then you end up like the New England Patriots ground game. Knew I'd bring that up somehow, didn't
you're
I?
gonna get that in there. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. Dr. West, do you want to chime in on your analysis of?
I have one,
Okay,
okay,
yeah.
I wanted to ask, You know, and it may be erroneous on my part, but I have assumed that OSBA would help. Asking us to support certain kind of bills, et cetera, along with the superintendents in the Washington County, COSA, and that they would say, these are the things that we would like you to help support, what have you. But it hasn't flowed that way since I've been on the board. You know, and so I don't know if that's okay or not.
I think well, at least OSBA has shifted. We are now sending the Monday update to every board
Yeah,
member.
well, that,
That was one huge change that we requested last year, so that board members themselves are aware, because we learned that it wasn't getting pushed out, and even if it got to chairs, chairs weren't getting into their boards, and even if it got to the boards, no one was looking at it. I think that could be an anchor that we use to say within this framework and based on where COSA is. There's also a little nuance to sometimes what OSBA asks for is not directly in line with some of the points that we would like to elevate. And sometimes we can be a little more bold with those points where we sometimes disagree, but that could be an anchor part. And I think they're trying to shift that key. But I do think what I've heard legislators say is that OSBA and COSA are organizations of no. So legislators, when they see OSBA lobbyists coming and COSA lobbyists coming up to the mic, they're prepared for them to tell legislators, this isn't a good idea. Now, that's a perception that I've heard. So they're starting to tune that out, right? And I think there is some impact to be had with individual districts, especially collectively as chairs, if we could get there, sharing actual fiscal impacts, which is the one thing that legislators say is resonating. Thoughts?
Well, there was a lot there,
I know. It is.
so I'm not sure where to start or insert myself.
Okay.
Actually, since, I'm not sure how tied to time you are. I do agree with much of what Director Truax said in terms of how you organize yourselves. Having whether it be an organizing document or a starting point with a draft for advocacy, I think is super helpful. I am not embedded in OSBA, so I don't know what you're receiving, what that looks like, but I do know that OSBA and COSA work pretty closely, and superintendents are in regular conversation with COSA around how do we support advocacy at the state level. So that is something that we can certainly coordinate on and collaborate on. But I don't know what that looks like from the OSBA side of things. In terms of these other questions posed, it sounds like more conversations.
I think so. I mean, I think this is a starting point. I was gonna ask before we close tonight, if the idea of having, and I've talked with Brisa and Alma about this as well, a couple subcommittees, and maybe we just need the idea that this board would be okay with maybe Pete and I working together to move this forward and draft up some ideas to bring back. Is that okay with you, Pete? I mean, I had talked to Brisa and Alma, who have talked about engagement ideas and things that when Alma's back, we might have a conversation about officially or unofficially just saying, hey, are we good with the two of them when they can, putting their heads together and bringing some things for us to consider. To your point, Pete, having somebody with a starting point based on this discussion we're having. Would there be any objections to that? I didn't really ask Pete, but we can be on that.
I'm afraid with that.
Okay, because I think what I'd like to do is see if he and I could put something together and then bring it back in from this conversation and see where we go. Okay, 7:30. Are we on 7:33? We're gonna adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.